Hello dear YouTube friends. I don't know if you're like me, but I do tend to collect things which I think would be useful storage items. And today I have with me some Pringle tins which I have decorated, and I thought I'd just share this tip with you so that maybe you could make a useful storage item too. I've basically used selvages, which are the woven ends on the sides of fabric. And I had a friend who made lots of kiddies' garments, so she always used to cut them off and they just have this lovely feeling. This particular kind of fabric is unique to South Africa. It's called shweshwe, and it originally came from German missionaries who taught the African women there how to print, and they've got all these lovely beautiful designs. So these designs generally you would find mostly on the local people, but I just love this fabric because it is pure cotton and it's this navy color. Normally the traditional ones are navy or brown backgrounds, but these days they're starting to print colors, but I love them because they were nice and cool to wear in a hot climate. So let me just remove these and I will show you how to make them. So what you're going to need to have now is a Pringle tin, and I've actually taken mine and I've just simply painted a coat of white paint on it, just in the eventuality of me perhaps missing a spot. Then what I have done is I've taken some of these strips of the selvage edges and I have measured all the way around so that there is a slight overlap on the other side. And one thing you'll notice about the selvage edges is that it is woven, and the one side will normally be quite tightly woven because it's the end, and then where it's been cut is slightly frayed. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with that. So I'm just going to separate my two colors, and I'm just working with two colors on each tin because I don't want it to get terribly busy. My idea is that I'm going to be actually storing my paintbrushes in these because I've got a lot of really nice watercolor brushes that need to stand upright and don't need to have other things that interfere with the bristles, because you know, if you've paid a lot of money for a brush and suddenly something leans against it and it causes the bristles to distort, it can actually be rather distressing. So what you're going to need now is to have your tin, and then you're going to just work with some Mod Podge. You could use PVA glue, but that's entirely up to you, and you need to apply this on generously. So first I'm going to start at the base area, and I'll explain to you why in a minute. And I'm putting this on really thickly, as you can see. Remember that your fabric is going to be terribly porous, and so you're going to want to have that as your base being soaking up. Excuse me. So you'll see that I've got a slightly fluffy edge and I've got a really hard edge with the selvages. So I'm going to put the fluffy edge down towards the bottom of the tin. Oh, excuse me. It's a really windy day outside. There's loads of dust and pollen flying around, so I'm not doing too well. Anyway, so what you're going to do now is you're going to take some of your Mod Podge on your brush, and you're just going to simply brush this over your fabric. So you're saturating it, you're encasing it completely in the Mod Podge, and this will mean that as you handle your item that you are able to wipe it down, which is a really big plus if you're working with paints, as I'm going to be. Where your fabric overlaps like this, you're going to need to make sure that you have it on really thickly so that you can smooth that over. Right, so I've basically got my row 1 around on here nicely. I'm going to use my lid from my container just to hold my paintbrush. Now I'm actually going to use my hand on the inside, and I'm going to do this so that I keep my hands nice and relatively clean. It's not always that easy to stay completely clean, but we'll try. So again, I'm going to be working with alternate color now. I'm just taking off any little fluffy stray bits of thread that I might see, and I'm wanting to lay the fluffy edge, which is that one, over the edge that's already down there, so that the hard edge is always working towards the top of the container. And just use the previous layer of fabric that you've put down as a guide. It looks terribly messy at this stage, but you'll see as you start to smooth things over that your podge first of all is going to soak into your fabric, and secondly you'll be brushing it all the time so it actually does even out. So it's going on fairly quickly. I'm making sure that each layer is lining up nicely. Necessary just adjust it. It won't be 100% accurate, but you're going to be as close as Bob's your uncle. And what a lovely way to have a little theme of color popping through, especially if you've done something like curtaining. Now you'll notice that I'm not being too fussy about where the join of my fabric is, and that's fairly deliberate because I don't want to have just this row of hard seams. I'm quite happy that it just be worked around the tin itself. Alright, so just smooth that on, line your fabric up nicely, and then take that excess Mod Podge and smooth it over. Generally speaking, if you use Mod Podge, it does tend to leave a slightly sticky residue, in which case one would normally apply a varnish of some sort, but strangely enough when you work on fabric you just don't seem to have that same problem. I think probably because it's more porous than things like paper if you were doing decoupage or card making. Alright, so just alternating colors here, and I will just continue with this process until I'm all the way done. And it's as easy as that. It really is. One of my favorite things is actually seeing what I can do with other people's scraps. So when I was part of a quilting guild in Cape Town, one of the ladies there gave me one day a whole lot of tiny little scraps, and she said, oh, I don't know what anybody can do with this, but I'm sure you'll be able to make something. And she was quite staggered because I actually made fabric. So I stitched all these little pieces together, and then I cut them out into little blocks, almost as if you were looking through one of those old what do they call them, slide frames, you know, where you had little windows of images showing through. So each little block had a frame, and then I stitched them together, and I made, out of her one bag of little scraps, I made 4 single bed quilts. And I am still going. I've made a quilt with diamonds, and I'm making another one with stars. So somebody else's bag of rubbish and I know she wouldn't have been bothered making it, but I like handwork because for me, I can pick it up and take it with me wherever I go. And yeah, it's just been a real joy. And also I think part of it is, you know, just looking at the fabrics that she'd chosen, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder what she made with this and who it was for. I mean, obviously I did see some of her quilts, but not all of them. And I had certainly thought I had a good idea of what the fabrics were available in the local fabric shops, but I found some there that were completely unknown to me, and yeah, they were lovely to work with. So it was like making a quilt with all these little jewels, and also a challenge, you know, because sometimes you're working with colors that aren't really the colors that you would normally choose, but it was really a fun project to do. So yeah, somebody else's scraps. So for me, I'm a big upcycler. I love to make things out of rubbish. I love to see things being repurposed, and this is just one way of using Dear Jones scraps. She made the most beautiful smock dresses for little kids using this fabric, and then she would often use just white embroidery cotton for her stitching, or sometimes red with some beads, and she did the most exquisite work, absolutely exquisite, until she was, yeah, she was pretty elderly when I used to take her shopping to get her fabric, but she just did the most beautiful work. She doesn't do that obviously anymore, but yeah, I've made loads of clothes and things with this too. I've woven rugs with these strips, I've made skirts, I've made quilts. Quilts are something that I love actually. Just before I left South Africa, I think I counted up, I'd made 54 quilts, which over a period of time when you're making them and giving them away, you just don't realize that you've done so many. But looking back at all the ones that I had done and the people they'd gone to, what a pleasure to be able to make something lovely for someone else. Right, so you can see this is not going to be something that takes you a lot of time to do. You just need to be very careful that as you're working, sorry, didn't mean to bump the camera, that as you're working that you are just making sure that there aren't any stray threads and that you are saturating your fabric completely. It is really difficult when you're gluing down fabric to have it without a sealant on the top, because if you're working with a liquid glue as opposed to a glue stick, it is going to push through the fabric and then you will always get marks. One of the only things that I've found that doesn't really mark ribbon, and I can't say that I've tested it on fabric yet, but I'm sure it will do the same, is, funny enough, gel medium. That seemed to work pretty well on ribbon without coming through. So that was always a nice thing to know about when I'm making cards. Oh dear, I've got a thread here. Let's just pull that off. You can also just brush your threads parallel to your fabric, and that also sorts out any issues you have with that. And I think I'm going to do that with this one here. So let's make sure I've got enough glue there. And one thing I must make sure I'm not doing is turning my brush up towards my camera and painting it full of podge. Oh, I had such a funny thing happen when I was teaching decoupage. I used to teach it almost in my sleep. There were so many people wanting to learn it at one time. And this lady came to me one day, one of my students, and she said to me, you know, I don't know what's going on. I seem to be going blind since I've started doing decoupage. And I said, well, how's that possible? Because I mean, it was only a 6-week course that I ran, and I didn't feel that that was really long enough to make somebody go blind. Anyway, she was really perturbed and she needed to have her eyes checked, so she went to her optometrist. And he tested her eyes and he said, no, your eyes are fine. They're absolutely fine. I can't understand why you're having such difficulty seeing. And then he said to her, pass me your glasses. And when he looked at the glasses, he just burst out laughing, because actually what had happened was, I think when we do these sort of things subconsciously, as she'd been working, she'd got a bit of podge on her fingers, which is what she worked out had happened in the end. And then she was using her fingers and pushing on the glass of her glasses to move the glasses up away from her face, because they're obviously sliding down. And so she'd built up this thin milky film of podge on her glasses, which was easily sorted out by the optometrist with a little bit of soap and water, but she really did think she was going blind. Shame. I felt very sorry for her. Her name was G. So G, I'm sorry that you had that experience. We all had a good laugh when we thought about what had happened, but we were very relieved that it was just an easy answer at the end of the day. Yeah, so those are little things that you have to be careful of, and I have to be mindful of not painting my camera lens because my brush is closer than you think. So we're nearly at the top. All that remains once I've got my last layer on is just to smooth out my Mod Podge that I have on the fabric, and then set this all aside to dry. So I'm just going to take the thinnest of the strips and do this as my last layer. I'm layering it under the lip of my tin, and I might just need to neaten up my paintwork, but that's fine, because with the podge on the fabric, I will be able to make sure that I don't get any that sticks on there and stains it. This will take a little bit of time to dry, because obviously it's a thickly applied layer of podge, and it's on both sides, and your fabric is thick, so maybe leave it overnight before you start using it. But when they start to dry and they're all ready to use, I think you'll be very happy with your Pringle tin conversion. Okay, so what I'm doing now is that I'm just going to be brushing this top to bottom, and then I'm going to wrap it around side to side, just so that if I have any thick residues of this podge lying around, that I'll be able to do that. And also if I've got any stray threads like those, I can just get them to lie parallel to the fabric so they're not so noticeable. Right, so going back round each little band, there's a thread that came out. Tuck those in. There we go. Well, that was a quick project to do, my friends. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. enjoy your creativity, make the most of all the things that pass your way that other people would pass by or toss in the bin. And I will do some more pictures at the end of this video for you to see the completed products all in a row. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and please consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love you to be part of my community. Bye for now.